Hello there, and welcome back to Grass Me Up, the premier lawn care and sports turf podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp from Eutrema. And one of the products and subjects that I've not talked about on this podcast is slugs and snails and Eutrema's fantastic slugger product that we invented. And the reason I'm talking about it in today's podcast is because we've got a fabulous new way of using it that we've invented. And so I'm going to talk about that later on. So, slugs and snails can be an issue in lawns. However, for most lawn care professionals, it's an additional problem that your customers might have in relation to other plants around the garden, and the same for sports turf. So you will have slug problems. The reason that there isn't that much of a problem with slugs and snails on grass is because a lot of iron fertilizer goes down on the grass, and iron is inhibitory to the action of the slugs. The other reason is that the damage it causes to grass is superficial. It's basically just mowing the grass. It's not like if you've got lettuce plants and they become completely unsaleable and inedible, that's the word. If you have slug damage, or you find a tomato with a slug inside it, it's pretty gross. Or say a red hot poker plant where it's completely eaten the flower and so there's no flowers produced. You get red hot poker plants with no flowers. So for lawns, it's not so much of an issue, but you may, as a professional or even an amateur, be dealing with slugs and there might be a problem. So slugs are mollusks related to octopuses, and you have to, if you're going to kill them, you've got to kill them quick because they potentially feel pain because they have opioid receptors, unlike insects where you don't have to kill them quick. That's something to consider. The number one problem of UK gardens is slugs. If you look at the RHS questionnaire, every year slugs are number one pest, more than lily beetle, more than black vine weevil, leather jackets, because they affect every type of plant pretty much. And because in the UK, we have a warm, wet climate in the summer. And whereas in America, it's much drier and slugs are not so much of an issue. In mainland Europe, they're not so much of a big an issue. There are there are worse pests than that. I actually have studied slugs in America and Poland and Japan and China because I actually look at the pollination of a plant called a Asarum. And in California, it's pollinated by banana slugs. And so I go off and study these gigantic bananas, or did do in the past. But that's nothing to do with plant care. It's just ecology and the environment and something I like to do in my free time before I had a family. Back onto slugs and snails in the garden. You may remember that slug pellets were based on a product called metaldehyde. This was an extremely effective slug killer because it attracted slugs to the poison. The poison itself was attractive to slugs. It was discovered because metaldehyde is also used as a fuel in camping, or was. And in France, the farmers were always finding loads of slugs next to where the potents had been when they'd been using metaldehyde fuel on their camping stoves. So the chemical companies started selling it in pellet forms to kill slugs. So it would attract, the chemical itself would attract the slugs. And then they used to use wheat bran as a sort of bulking agent. But then they found they had to put a blue dye in because people were eating them. And if you get them in your food, it's a big problem. And if birds eat them, then it's a big problem. And if pets eat them, it's a really big problem. Basically, the most horrific death you could imagine, blood flying out of orifices. Imagine this. So it was banned for this reason, and also banned because the water companies didn't like it because it was the number one pesticide they couldn't take out of drinking water. So they were building up in the drinking water. You imagine it produces a horrible death. In small volumes, it's probably not doing great things to your human body as well. So it was banned in domestic use probably around 2012, I think. 2016 maybe, I think around 2016, and then in commercial use as well. So they had to find something safer, and they developed something called ferric phosphate, chelated ferric phosphate, and these were in the slug pellets. And you'll find that these are far, far, far less toxic, but also less effective, because they don't attract the slug to the pellet. And so that's a big problem. And going back a bit, there used to be a product called Sluggo, and you used to be able to buy that on Amazon, and it was a liquid metaldehyde product. So spraying that all over your plants, really quite dangerous. But so that got banned first, and then people were going on eBay and buying bottles of it for £80. So crazy situation. So that got banned. Ferric phosphate tablets came involved. And then Eutrema, we invented a ferric phosphate liquid. Now, ferric phosphate shouldn't go into solution, but we have some fancy chemistry and processes here at Eutrema, one of a kind worldwide. And we produced a ferric phosphate solution, a stable, green, thick gel that you can spray onto your plants to protect them, to keep them off from slug and snail attack. We don't say that you can use it to kill slugs and snails, because then it would be classed as a pesticide. And so we don't want to spend millions of pounds registering it as a pesticide. But it is the same active ingredient that's in slug pellets. But you can also use ferric phosphate as an iron fertilizer. It will provide, especially ericaceous plants, a good dose of chelated iron and phosphorus. So it's really good for that as well. So we've been selling this product for a number of years, and a bit of a brainwave recently in the lab, we realized that potentially you could use it in an undiluted form to protect potted plants, containerized plants. So you could paint it with a paintbrush around your plant pots and let it to dry, and then the ferric phosphate would remain, and that is not a natural barrier, a barrier to slugs and snails that they won't be able to get across, because they will be put off by the ferric phosphate. It will interfere with their biochemistry as soon as they approached it. So fantastic opportunity there, especially terracotta pots. The gel applies really well to it. Plastic plant pots might need a couple of applications to get a good layer around it, because of the way the plastic sort of repels liquid. But terracotta pots and even plastic pots, great. Ornamental pots, probably avoid that unless you don't mind a bit of sort of light yellow staining, which the ferric phosphate, when it remains, will leave. The beauty is that the ferric phosphate's in solution, and then the things that got it into solution evaporate off, and that leaves a layer of ferric phosphate around your plant pots, and that won't be washed off by water for a long time. So you could potentially get several weeks worth of protection from one application. And if you're in a greenhouse or the plants are not getting watered and the rain isn't getting onto them, then potentially even longer. So a fantastic novel use of our product. And I think it could be such a good use of Slugger that we might even change the marketing of the whole product. So we might just call it Slug Paint. So rather than saying, slug defense product, spray this on your plants, we might just start selling it as a slug paint for planting on plant pots and things like that. Might give away a free paintbrush and paint pot with every order of Slugger. Here we'll find out. Have also reduced the price of Slugger, even though it's the same amount of ferric phosphate as several large bottles of slug pellets. It was £20 for a bottle, and I think that's a lot of people don't want to spend £20 on 500 mils of a product. So reduce that to $14.99 plus delivery. So hopefully everyone can access this product and have a go at painting it on the plants. So if you've got hostas in pots or anything that's being attacked by slugs, lettuce plants, things like this, could even go on raised beds. You could put it on the wood around the raised beds, paint it on. 500 mils of paint is going to go a long way, especially in a small strip. The whole plant pot does not need to be treated, just a circle surrounding the rim, just to keep the slugs from getting in the top. That'll be more than enough. So maybe 1 or 2 centimeters across. So I'm really happy with this new sort of use for Slugger. Helps us in a number of different ways and help you in a number of different ways. If you can think of any other good uses of that product or any of our products, novel ways of using it, then let me know. It's potentially a big one for both amateur and commercial horticulture, really, because things like strawberry growers could paint their raised troughs and things like this. There's a whole host of potential different use of this sort of slug paint. We do get farmers, especially oilseed rape but also wheat and potato farmers, asking us if we can sell large volumes of Slugger, but we don't sell it because we gave out about £3,000 worth of Slugger to arable farmers to test, and none of them gave us any results back and don't even know they tested it. So we completely stopped that. So we're not even trying to sell it into commercial agriculture now because They annoyed me so much by not using the product that we gave out for free. So yeah, there you go. Did you know that slugs do have a shell? It's inside their body. And so when people say that, slugs are just snails without shells, you can say, no, actually, they do contain a shell. That piece of information is pretty useless, but it is interesting. And they're the kind of facts that I specialize in here at Eutrema. We actually sell most amounts of slugger when the nematode production is out of action. The company that makes nematodes against slugs, they have massive supply issues. And so whenever about twice a year, they stop production. And so that's when we really make a killing on slugger. Interestingly, the main product out there is called Nemaslug, but now there's a Nemaslug 2.0. And that's supposed to be a new species, Phasma haberdastus california, as opposed to Phasma haberdastus hermaphrodita. That's off the top of my head, those scientific names, by the way. I'm not Googling it. The reason they introduced the California species is because it wasn't the patent had run out on the first one. So heaven forbid they should have one that other people could copy. So they introduced this new species. Obviously, they claim that Nemaslug 2.0 was a lot better. I think it was easier to culture as well, easier to grow in the lab, in the factory where they culture the nematodes. And the other interesting thing is that for certain countries, they introduced it obviously with these agrochemical companies very focused on North America, very focused on the USA. That is the world to them. And then sort of Europe is a secondary thought. When they came to launch it in Europe, there were some laws around it had to be natively found in the environment, otherwise it's classed as an alien species. And luckily, look upon luck, they found these nematodes in the wild in Wales, I think it was. Isn't that a coincidence, an interesting finding? Yeah. And I believe that as much as you probably believe that. Okay. What else is there? There is other ways of controlling slugs and snails. Copper tape around plant plots doesn't really work. There's no scientific basis for it. Hence why we are promoting the use of slugger as a slug paint. And diatomaceous earth, mixed results. Wool pellets, very, very mixed results. I would definitely rather be putting slug paint around, a little dose of slugger, non-hazardous, pet friendly, around, and hoping that a barrier of wool that's going to get all clogged and just wet and soggy is going to help. I would have thought a soggy wool would be a perfect environment for slugs to live in, but yeah, there are people selling soggy wool pellets as slug repellents. What else is there? I'm trying to think what other ways there are of controlling slugs and snails. Beer traps. They're an interesting one. If you actually put a video onto the beer traps and time lapse, you'll find that lots and lots of slugs visit the slug traps. Very few, a small percentage, actually die by drowning in them. Most just go for a nice drink. And the danger is that you're attracting slugs into your garden and only a certain amount of them are dying in the beer trap. So are you bringing in more slugs to your garden than you are killing in your beer traps? And are you wasting good beer? Which is, a sin, isn't it? So that's something to consider. Other ways of controlling slugs and snails: crushing them, stamping on them, going out with a torch at night, flinging them over your garden into your neighbours. I would never do that. Growing slug-tolerant varieties is an option, although you'll struggle to find a slug-resistant variety of lettuce, for example. Or there are a few hostas that claim to be slug-resistant, I think. Slugs go dormant in the summer, something called eastivation, a bit like winter hibernation. But when the rains return, they come back with a vengeance. Other ways of controlling slugs is if you do any ploughing or rotivating or digging, when you allow big air pockets to survive that sort of process, then you are going to get an inundation of slugs, because the slugs will thrive in those sort of air pockets, large air pockets in the soil. That's one of the disadvantages of cultivating your ground. And you'll get a boom in the population the next year, and to consider. But it certainly happens on sort of allotments where all the slugs, you rotivate yours, slugs come in from other people's plots, and you've got to remember that 98% of all the slugs in the garden or in the allotments or on the farm are in the soil. They very rarely make it out onto the surface. We think of slugs as being this terrestrial, above-ground organism, but actually most of them are below the ground, eating roots and other things, fungi. Slugs are also important for breaking down weeds, breaking down stuff in the compost heap. And so always good to target them, and they're good food for birds as well, and hedgehogs. So the beauty of ferric phosphate is it's non-hazardous to mammals and birds. So don't need to worry about that and the wider environment. I'm trying to think of anything else I can waffle on about slugs and snails about. The reverse is true for some poisons. So the death cap fungus, extremely poisonous to humans, is actually eaten by slugs. They don't seem to be bothered by it, affected by it. Whereas completely, any very small amount in a human and you would be dead. So yeah, that's something to consider. One final point about the biological control, the nematodes, is that they also only control certain species of slugs. So you might find that if you use them continually, you might get one particular type species of slug or snail building up in your garden or environment or grounds, because the nematode will only work against certain species. So there are a number of different species it won't work against. So that's something to consider. So check out Slugger by Eutrema. Unique product. You won't find it anywhere else. It's a thick green liquid, and you can paint it onto your pots, onto your raised beds, anywhere around your plants where you can get a paint to dry and provide a perimeter, a slug, a no-go zone, a no man's land for slugs. Thought you would find that interesting. If you did, please give this podcast a review, a like, but at the very least, just check out eutrema.co.uk. And if you've got any questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, or suggestions, I've said that, yeah, then do get in touch with me at russell@eutrema.co.uk. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.